Good morning, everybody. Hello, how are you? Welcome. It's always good to see you. It's another edition of Growth Bites Lunch and Learn edition. So there's a lot going on this week, and I'm just excited that we get to meet again. The year is flying; it's going by so quickly, and it's unbelievable. As usual, let me go on mute. Always good to see you. It's another my live stream because I keep on forgetting to do that, and it's so distracting to hear my own echo with the time lag. Sorry about that. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Eduardo Lopez. I founded and started VSharp, and finance managers hire me because they're feeling like their careers are stalled, like they're stuck, and like they're not making the money that they deserve. So I help them stand out from the competition, get earmarked for more promotions, get recognized for faster growth. And I guarantee that, guaranteed in 2 years or less. My voice is not always the best in the morning, so I do apologize. This is part of the adventure of being live. So there's a lot of good questions this morning. And what I'd like to do is probably go straight into them and try to get through them as quickly as I can, because there's actually something pretty cool that I wanted to show you towards the end of today's discussion if I get to that. So the first question is, my team will be reduced in restructuring. How can I communicate these job cuts to my team without them blaming me? All right, my friend, you should not be worried about them blaming you. You should be worried about being transparent with them and making sure that they understand. So let me start with the response to your question. First of all, you need to be transparent. Why is this happening? Acknowledge that it is happening. Many managers that I've seen have made the huge mistake of trying to hide something that is evident and not be forthcoming and transparent with their teams. Don't be that person. Acknowledge it. It is happening. If there's going to be people affected in your organization, then let them know that there will be people that are going to be affected. Be empathic, be compassionate, and do not just make an announcement at the first opportunity you can. Select the right time and the right place to make your announcement. Transparency is always going to go a long way. If you're concerned is that your team will blame you, what that will do is stop you or prevent you from being honest, or from being timely, or from just being as compassionate, as fully present as you should be. Do not worry about blame being placed on you. The more transparent you are, the more evident this is going to be to everybody, that this is not just you being acting on your own and blaming the company. And by the way, do not blame the company. Do not act like, poor me, I'm being forced to do that. Poor you, you're the victims of this bigger evil entity. That doesn't serve anybody. It doesn't serve you, doesn't help your career, doesn't help them, doesn't help the company. As always, taking a negative stance on things is probably the wrong approach. So don't do it. Be positive. Be empathetic, be understanding, be compassionate, and let them know and explore options. Give them resources. Be open and available for them to approach you and to have a discussion about it. Okay, the next question, let's go to that. How often should job satisfaction and engagement be measured? Well, a common practice is for companies to measure that at least once a year. It is not necessarily best practice to do that. Depends on the circumstances. My personal view is every company will have different needs and will adapt the timing at which or in which they do this type of survey to their own needs. There's more than one kind of survey. So like I said, the most common practice is at least once a year. But some companies do it on a quarterly basis because they probably need to pivot earlier. They probably need to adapt to circumstances that are changing. They probably just want to keep a closer pulse on what's going on. And now that I mentioned the word pulse, some companies might also choose to just do pulse surveys. Pulse surveys are those that focus on a specific topic. And so, for example, if there's a question in the engagement set of, in the questionnaire that is, just making it up, geared towards, do we tolerate mediocrity? Then the pulse survey might measure any progress related to that particular question. Or it could be any other question. My team has enough, or I have enough resources to do my job. Or I'm aware of company policy, right? So whatever it is, a pulse survey measures that. And it's often in more frequent, shorter time spans. It could be once a month. It could be once a quarter. It could be once a week, depending on what the circumstances dictate for your organization. That's what will give you the frequency at which this is done. What is, and the other thing that I was neglecting or forgetting to mention, my friend, was just regular feedback mechanisms. If you set up the regular good old open door policy, even if you don't have an office indoors, if you just have a policy where you're accessible to people to air their concerns, then that's another way of getting a feel for where the organization stands. At the very least, you should be doing this annually because it's super important. It's key for you to know where your people stand. Where do you need to correct? Where do you need to modify your approach? Remember that you spend more time at work than with your family and loved ones. Therefore, why not make it as easy as you can, as enjoyable as you can? That's my personal view. Good question. Okay, let's go to the next one. Where should I focus first to help my associate who has a great deal of knowledge but falls apart when presenting to senior executives in my company? This is so common. When you have people who know their stuff, they're experts, they are well known and well versed in the things that they do. They're deep. And yet when you put them in front of more senior members of the organization, they seem to crumble. The best thing you can do is give them reassurance. They have to be aware of their depth of knowledge, of their command of the topic at hand, and you need to help them. Probably one good thing for you to do with them is practice. Help them role play it, dry run the presentation if it's a presentation. So that's thing number one, is help them prepare, help them deliver it in a way that will be effective, that will reflect self-confidence, that will convey that they're in command of the situation and of the topic. Impress upon them and help them prepare and preparation and the importance of preparation. They have to come to the meeting knowing that they're ready for questions to be answered, or to be asked, rather. And not only are they ready to answer questions that come up, they have foreseen those questions. They are prepared with a response, and they are good at listening. One of the biggest mistakes that I've seen from people that get nervous in this kind of meetings, and hopefully, well, not sure, probably your colleague suffers from this too, is people do not hear and respond the actual question that's being asked. So they hear something, they translate that into the question that they are prepared for, and that's the answer that they give, not what was actually asked. So make sure that you help them prepare, you give them reassurance, you help them understand that they need to be very careful in listening to what the question is, and then to try to answer as succinctly as possible that very exact question. If they have to repeat the question back to the person, hey, did I understand correctly? Is this what you're asking? Confirm, and then give their answer in as brief a manner as possible. Give them a safe space to air their concerns or their nervousness before the meeting. It's natural, it's a human reaction, and we've all been there. If they know a lot, but they're very junior, they've never been exposed to senior executives, then let them air it out. That'll give them a chance to breathe. That'll take a lot of the weight off of their chest. And then you pair it with the rest of the strategies that we were mentioning before. You give them reassurance. You give them a chance to practice. You play devil's advocate. You ask the questions. You help them be prepared with all the questions that could come up. And you just let them know this is a safe space and you're going to learn from it. There's never a magic silver bullet that is going to magically help your colleague lose their fear. They will always be a little nervous, but they can do a lot better if you help them. So be there for them, reassure them, let them be prepared, help them, and let them know that, hey, they're human. You're not expecting them to be perfect, and they're going to learn from this experience. That's a good question because it's more common than anybody realizes. So your job as a leader is to make sure that your team is well prepared and that they are representing themselves in the best possible way. All right, let's go to the next one. How does intrinsic motivation differ from extrinsic motivation? So intrinsic motivation, let me start the other way around. Extrinsic motivation is one that comes, as the word implies, from the outside. So that would be your salary, or the car you get, or the office you get, or the title you have, or things like this that are bestowed upon you as a reflection of your contribution, of your seniority, of your importance to the company. Many times, or I would say most of the time, extrinsic compensation is the least important. To be clear, extrinsic compensation or motivation is very impactful in the short term. So when it's given, right that very moment, it has a high impact, but it dilutes very, very quickly. Whereas intrinsic motivation, and what is intrinsic, that lasts a long time. So intrinsic motivation is the satisfaction that you get from your job, the sense of pride that you have from doing your job, the sense of accomplishment, the sense that you are contributing to what your company is trying to achieve. That feeling, and I know that you felt it, my friend, that feeling of, hey, I'm helping. Man, that was a good day. We accomplished something. I did something that was hard. I did something that took a lot of planning, but it came out perfect. That is you cannot substitute for that. I was getting tripped with the word unsubstitutable. Anyway, hard to replace, irreplaceable. You cannot substitute for it. That feeling cannot be topped even by a fat old salary increase, because even though the short-term benefit might be a little less than, a fat bonus, the permanence of that benefit is going to be a lot longer lasting for the intrinsic motivation than it is for the extrinsic motivation. In fact, studies have shown that comparing people who receive, so two groups, one that receives intrinsic motivation, one that just receives extrinsic motivation, the effects of that motivation are measurably longer for intrinsic motivation, and the productivity in the long run is better for people who are intrinsically motivated. So you as a leader, what does that mean for you as a leader? You should aim to give your team intrinsic motivation. For sure, give them extrinsic. So if they merit it, give them the promotion, give them the salary increase, give them the bonus, give them the kudos in front of the powers that be in your company. But make sure that they feel that the work they're doing is worth their abilities. It's an effort that requires their skills. It's something they're going to be proud of when they turn around and look at it and realize just how big of a task they just accomplished. And let's put a pin on that, because that's actually the cool thing that I wanted to share with you later today, and we'll get to that piece. Thanks for that question. That was a good one. And here we have the fifth and last question. Sorry about that. I like this because I've been in this situation. As a new finance leader, I've had to make changes, big changes. How can I tackle disengagement and lack of ownership in my team in 2024? They are very disengaged. Well, no wonder. So if you're the new leader, you came in to reform your function or to transform it or to better bring it into whatever new phase your company is going into, you probably, as you say, have had to make big changes, and those changes could have been painful for many people. Maybe you had to let people go. Maybe you had to reassemble teams, and that separation is being painful or is proving difficult for your team to assimilate. Whatever you have had to do, it's probably a difficult thing or a change that your team will need to adapt to. So be empathetic, know that, and be there for them. It's the first thing that I would recommend. The second is, as you reorganize, as you redefine things that your team will have to go and do now, once that you've implemented the changes that you did, make sure that you give them things that are challenging. Understand what their skill sets are. Understand how proficient they are in those skill sets, in those abilities that they need to do their job. And give them something to do that will be meaningful, something that will challenge them, that will allow them to know that they're helping move the cart forward, that they're moving the needle. Something that they will know you value, and let them know that you value their work and that you appreciate their work. It's been proven, and that's exactly actually why I went out and looked for something prompted by a couple of the questions here regarding with engagement, is the more value you put into your work, the more effort you put into your work, the more value, recognition you get because of that, the more you're going to have ownership for it, the more you're going to feel like it's something that you want to continue to do, the more engaged you're going to be. And so in order for you as the new leader, after the changes that you made, to keep your team engaged and energized, is give them clarity about what it is you're trying to do, why it is you're trying to do it, and what the role is they're going to be playing in that project, in that transformation. And with that, make sure that they get challenges that they're going to be proud of tackling, and help them tackle them, so that at the end of the year, as they make progress, they're going to be a lot prouder of the things that, with you, they were able to accomplish. Okay, my friend? Does that make good sense? You with me? Okay, so let me share with you part of what I wanted to share here today. So there's a study. The title, you see that at the bottom of the screen, The IKEA Effect When Labor Leads to Love. And this talks precisely to what we've been discussing. So this is especially geared towards how do you make sure that people get work to do, but they also use or get energy, motivation, engagement from that work. So there's a group of scientists that you see there at the bottom, and what they did was try to measure how you could get that engagement and that energy from people who do their work. They did some experiments. First experiment is they took, there was an observer, and they had Legos, so the game you use to assemble robots or whatever. In this case, it was robots. And what they wanted to do was measure how many cycles of building a robot and that robot being disassembled and doing that robot again, how many cycles of construction, deconstruction, reconstruction they could go through. And they split the population for the study in several groups. One was a couple of groups. One was called the significant group. And they were given a robot to assemble, and when they brought it back, the experimenter looked at it, acknowledged it, put it in a bin, and broke it apart. The other group was called Sisifus, for Sisyphus. That's a Greek mythology story in which a person is Sisyphus is pushing a big boulder up a hill. When he gets to the cusp, the boulder rolls down that hill, and he needs to go back and push it up for the next one. He's condemned to do this for eternity. And so that's the Sisyphus. The Sisyphus Syndrome, the Sisyphus story that it never ends. And the Sisyphic group, the second one, also came with their legal robot. The researcher just took it, didn't even acknowledge it, broke it apart, threw it in a bin. So the difference between one and the other was the first one, significant, were acknowledged. Okay, got it, here's your product. They disassembled it, threw it in a bin. The second one, no acknowledgement at all. They just received the robot, the little robot was disassembled, thrown in a bin. And the number of times, the number of cycles that they went through, you will probably not be surprised, but the Sisifus group went through this cycle 7 times. Whereas the significant group did this 11 times. That's 60% more, just because their work had been recognized. Now let's go to the second experiment they did. Random pairs of letters. So they took a piece of paper, experimenters did, with a bunch of random letters in them, and gave them to a few groups in the participant population. For one group, what they did was the participants had to find adjacent pairs of letters in that jumble. And for every pair of letter, they would get a certain amount of money. I think it was 30 cents. Then if they found another, they would get a little less. If they found another, a little less, and so on and so forth. And the objective was to measure how many times they wanted to go through the work of finding another pair. Since every time that they found one pair, less money was offered, right? So at which point were participants going to give up? The first group, they found their pairs, they got their 30 cents. The researcher looked at it and said, okay, thank you, go for the next one, and so on. And they went from 30 cents that they started at down to 15 cents. The next group was one where there was no acknowledgement. So they found the pair of letters. The researcher just got the sheet of paper from them, tore it apart, gave them another one, and that's it. No acknowledgement, no effort or visible effort even to look at the outcome of the participants' work. And so they went, right? So they gave them the 30 cents. They didn't look at the paper. They just tore it apart, gave them a new one for them to go back and find another pair of letters. The second pair of letters, less money, etc. The number of cycles, so these guys went from 30 only to 26 cents. And so what that shows is, again, less recognition, less highly valued the outcome of the work translated into less willingness to go further. There was actually a third group, and that third group was just set to, they handed in their paper, the researcher said, thank you, threw it in a bin. So they didn't look at it, but they did acknowledge that they received something. These guys went from 30 to 23. So the ones who got recognition went through a lot of cycles, from 30 cents down to 15 cents. The ones who just got acknowledgement that their product had been handed in went from 30 to 23. The ones who got nothing just made it through a couple of cycles that went from 30 to 26. Again, more value, recognition, effort is something that will allow, in this case it was just the recognition, will allow your team to go further. Third experiment, IKEA Bed Builders. So you had 3 groups. One was observers. Another one was builders of an IKEA bed with instructions. And another one was builders of IKEA beds without instructions. And they were asked to rank the product. So once it was finished, everybody was asked to rank the product. So from 0 to 7, with 7 being I love it, they were asked to say, okay, you builder with instructions, where do you rank your product? You builder without instructions, you observer. No surprise, the observers were the lowest raters. They had no skin in the game, no effort put into the product. They just gave it probably dispassionate or more distant rating, and it was lower. I forget what the scale was. The importance is not on the scale itself as much as in the relative proportions. Builders who had instructions ranked their product 63% higher than the observers. 63% higher on average, meaning they had put in the effort. They knew what it took to build the bed. They put a lot more value into it. Now, builders without instructions ranked even higher, or they ranked their product even higher than those that had instructions. I forget what the number was, but you know, the ones with instructions were 63%. These were like 80 or something. It was a much higher percentage of rating versus the observers. Again, because it had been a lot more difficult for them, they were putting a lot more value into the product of their work. So that's another set of results that evidenced how recognition and hard, challenging work produce more intrinsic, a higher intrinsic value assigned to the work product. Fourth experiment, origami. You know what origami is, the little paper that's folded into shapes, a little bird, a little frog. And they were, again, given, so you had observers, you had people who had instructions, you had people who didn't have instructions. And the observers, observers were the experimenters. What they did was they said to the participants, okay, I'm going to ask you to do a series of origamis. They're mine, they're going to be mine, and but you're going to build them for me. So those that had instructions went and did their job, came back, and then the experimenter would say, okay, it's mine, but I'm going to sell it to you. What's the price you're willing to pay for it? They named the price. And so whatever that price was, when they compared that same result to what they got from the people with no instructions, so people who had had a lot harder time building the origami, the people that had no instructions, that were proud that they had completed their work and that had a difficult time completing it, valued it at 5 times more than the preceding group. So people without instructions who managed to complete the task were giving that a value 5 times as large as those who had instructions. And finally, this is more of a case study than an experiment. In the 40s, there were pre-mixed cakes. That's the bottom there bullet. Those pre-mixed cake mixtures. All you had to do is open a box, put that into a bowl, add water, milk, not even milk, just water, mix, throw into a mold, into the oven, out came a cake. It was not selling. So they were wondering, what's the matter? What's happening? It's a perfectly good cake. It's actually a nice product. So they did the same thing, but they took out the powdered milk, and they required for the user to throw in their eggs and milk and to do some more work. And that's when the product started to take off. Conclusion is when people put effort into that, it was their cake. When it was just out of the box, it was a cake. And that goes back to these questions on motivation, intrinsic or extrinsic. Make sure that your team knows that you value their work. Make sure that they know what their task is. Make sure that it's challenging, that it's using their skills to the fullest. The more challenged they feel, the prouder they will feel when they complete that task. And that's how you can drive motivation, ownership, pride, and the willingness to do something that's even harder for the next time around. So I'll stop here. I hope that my answers were helpful. And I hope that this exercise, this experiment that I wanted to share with you was illuminating and added some insight into our conversation earlier on. So with that, I wish you a fantastic start of the week, a fantastic remainder of the week, and I will see you next week. By the way, I'm traveling. I'm going to be out of town abroad for the next 2 weeks. So it might just be me in some hotel room with my laptop. Bear with that. But I will see you next week. Take care. Be successful. And I'll see you soon. Bye.